This is so dark. All right, let's see if it goes down. All right, hello everybody. Tom Kaczynski here. Welcome to another Sunrise in Pineland, where you watch me try to handle technology and fail miserably. I can't even turn a light bulb on. How many poles does it take to turn on a light bulb? The answer is undefined. We don't even know. I can't get the damn fan on. Anyway, good morning, everybody. It's 8 a.m. here in the United States East Coast, 9 a.m. Atlantic time for our friends out that way. No, I'm okay. I think I need to make the screen a little lighter here. Just give me 1 second here. We're going to work through some technical difficulties. We're having some technological differences. But give me 1 second. Just going to adjust it because we're doing this on the camera, which is a little bit different. So just want to say I hope the Lord's blessing be upon you today as I go through and I get this bit going so I can see a little better. And the wife is providing some extra lighting. Everyone say hi to Dana. She's here. Wave to the camera, dear. Okay, you guys see she's there. That's really her. I'm not holding her hostage. If anything, she would be running away because I'm going to talk about currency a little bit today, and she hates that because it's boring. But it's important. So I want to start the stream. Today's show I labeled Convoys, Currency, and Propaganda. I want to talk in some more depth about some things that are happening with the convoy, the timing of it. We're going to look into the question of how the system may try to turn this and put two big ideas in your head at the beginning. Number one, of course, is the idea of the insurrection narrative that we are seeing pushed hard out of Ottawa and all of the amplifiers, including in the global media. We're also going to talk about what this means for the greater reset, the digital currency thing. Remember, Trudeau was a protege of Klaus Schwab. And if you want to believe the Telegram memes, apparently he is the grandchild of a Rothschild. It's funny how every time it comes back to the same story, right? I shared the link with it, and I'll let some of our resident etymologists do the actual work. But apparently, his mother was a Rothschild who married into a different family. So Schwab is hiding, Schwab the deck with the fact that all the money is behind this game. All right, so I want to start with my monologue with the fact I was really pissed off last night, and I almost came on the camera to talk to you guys about this because I ended up in up along the northern border last night for reasons that aren't really relevant because the snow is coming down in buckets today, and from what I read, it's going to stop around 3 a.m. tomorrow. So I am now living in an igloo, but hey, at least maybe the snow will insulate us and keep us warm. Let's hope for miracles, right? But what I wanted to say was I ended up listening to CBC One. Now, CBC One is like the Canadian equivalent of NPR, except up there they don't really have so many other networks because the networks are heavily subsidized by the federal government of Canada, and of course they have a certain viewpoint. So I'm listening to the NPC One producers, and then I listened to their 9 p.m. show where they were talking about how they had a couple people, someone from I think McLean's not the McGill University in Montreal, a big university there, someone from Queens College, someone from Ottawa College. And they were talking about the truckers, but you would think they were talking about ISIS the way this conversation went forward. They were like, this insurrection where terrorist attacks are going on, and it was just like, it was crazy how they described it, but you could see they were dripping with anger and hatred. And like, even when they did the video vignettes, it'd be like, Canadian truckers come to Ottawa to profess freedom. And they have this woman with this really depressed, angry voice. But is this really about as stories of hatred and white supremacy go around? And then they show this Zoom conference of like everyone there, the people who are so tough but can't even get together in a single room because a virion might kill them. Because they trust the science and they trust the medicine so much that they won't go anywhere near one another. Interesting story that. Let's leave that aside. But they're there talking, and they have the head of the Ottawa Police there, Watson, in the chat with the Ottawa mayor, and they're like, "Yeah, Trudeau went, and they got the GoFundMe canceled, and that they were trying to get these people. Oh, now we're going to take fuel from them." And we hear stories of people being arrested. We saw a guy who was honking his horn, dragged out of his car, and put in the brig. And this is absolutely crazy, but this is what's going on, and they present it as an insurrection. And when I was listening to the show with the talking heads, they're like, "Well, we always thought in Canada we didn't have these types of people, but 10% of Canadians really are awful people. They probably got it from the Americans who are funding them. And bad news for you Canadians, the Americans do know about this now, and we are going to fund them, and we're going to keep funding them because they're standing up for freedom, they're standing up for liberty, and they're standing up against an evil totalitarian medical agenda that's being used to bring in a social credit score system. We all understand this who've been watching this for some time, but what I couldn't get past and what had me all worked up was just how bad and how heavy the propaganda was. They were like, it's only a matter of time before some terrorist action is taken by these awful people. And in fact, if you watch this, and just not even an hour ago, Dana and I watched the people who are, let's call them the chief. organizers, facilitators, whatever you want to call them, for the Freedom Convoy talking about. They had their own press conference and they were saying, look, we don't want violence. We're doing everything we can to agree, but we will not accept it. We want our scientists to sit with your scientists and share evidence that you won't listen to because we think this is more about, their words, political science than actual science. And by the way, they're right. It's pretty obvious that that's what this is about. And it's pretty obvious that other countries are moving fully away from this agenda. But why is that not happening here in the United States? Or why is that not happening in Canada? Well, now at this point, if it was done, it would be presented as weakness and them giving in. And the last thing that they want to do is let the truckers think they got a victory, even though we are seeing more lockdowns happen in more places. We saw the Windsor Bridge, actually. What's it called? Is it the Friendship Bridge, the Ambassador Bridge? Anyway, the big bridge between Detroit and Windsor, which is one of the heaviest traffic crossings of where a lot of Ontario's industry moves into the American Midwest for shipping and vice versa. Truckers were out there shutting that down. We saw more of this happen in Calgary, and hey, maybe the Russians are funding them. Brian writes, but it doesn't really matter. A lot of people are funding them because what we are seeing now is the breakout of a much bigger fight, which is that the people of these various countries against the governments that hate us so much. And so I was watching a piece on Tucker Carlson about this, and Tucker did a 14-minute piece that was excoriating of the contempt with which the progressive elite looks at the actual working class they claim to represent. But there were two parts of it. Number one, Tucker is an interesting figure to me. I just want to say this. Tucker says some of the smartest things on TV, but supposedly the guy's been a CIA asset forever. I actually believe that. And I believe his job is to say true things so that when the big lie needs to come forward, like the way he handled January 6th for a very long time. He's there to make sure that people don't go beyond the edge and that he's kind of like the last break. So he has to give you a lot of truth to keep you in it. And the reason I say that is I was watching this video and he spent a lot of time in it talking about cryptocurrency and the truckers, once they went away from GoFundMe, which was terrible, and they went to Give Send Go, which is better. The crypto was an option, that Bitcoin was an option. And I thought it was interesting that he's talking about, BTC funding because that's something, a lot of people don't talk about. But he's like, this is the pathway to freedom. But think about it this way. If you have an electronic tracking system for actual currency where everything can be seen by the government, where everything's transparent, do you have any liberty? You want liberty? How about paper money? I hate to say it, fiat money's crap. We all understand that. I mean, gold and silver's better. But my point is something that's untrackable, untraceable, where you don't have eyes on it by the government at every step of the way. And in this situation, you do have that. And it made me think about what we're going to talk about when we get a little further into this program, which is the MIT and the Federal Reserve Bank of Boston have been working diligently to create your new digital dollar. And in fact, that they are getting very close to putting that out there. And you will be interested to see some of the features of it. But back to Canada for a minute before we go forward. So they have been bringing RCMP police in there. I've heard numbers ranging from 300 to 1,800, that they're confiscating fuel from different people, that people are being dragged to jail, and that the Ottawa police, by and large, don't really want to get into this, but they're getting forced into it. They made an injunction. A judge up there said for 10 days they couldn't honk. So they're trying. In fact, they're being too reasonable, in my opinion, in trying to get along with the government up there. But they are trying to do that because they're like, we just want to have a serious conversation. And what was interesting is I watched these convoy organizers, and maybe Dana will offer a comment in agreement or disagreement to this because she watched it with me. But when we watched it, they spoke very professionally. These spoke like people who had either organized NGOs or they organized military logistics. Like you had a guy who said, my job is counterintelligence. Like this is not something, if you just had a couple grassroots organizers, and I formed things at the grassroots level, a lot of times it takes a long time for people to figure out what the actual functions are. But these people have a plan, they have organization, they have appointed speakers. This is well structured, which means one of two things.
SD6.
It's SD6, right? Shout out to Alias. One of two things comes to mind. Either one is it was organized by people who have a lot of skills and talents, who have been waiting and picked their time, and that's possible. I don't want to discount that possibility. I know a lot of militia guys who think that way. Not a bad position, and if they do, good for them. Truckers do have to deal with logistics. They live in a world where these are realities. That's a possibility. Or number two, these are people who have been set up to move the narrative along a certain way at a certain point in time. And if government has to be the fall guy to put in a new system, What does that mean? Because what's happening functionally is America and Canada are being drawn closer together, which fits into the New World Order vision of having different groups together. That they're being put together with the idea that the existing currencies don't really work very well and that the governments are corrupt, but that the idea is that this new currency might be a way to help and save them. But it's a good thing, just like we were presented like that the jab was going to be a good thing. And now, oh no, the jab's a bad thing. But now that we're past that, and we've broken our economy, we need this currency. And this bothers me because, like I was saying, I was reading None Dare Call It a Conspiracy the other day, Gary Allen. This was the same trick that J.P. Morgan pulled from 1907 to 1913 to get the Federal Reserve Bank in. That it was enforced misery on the people that bankers create where there were medical issues. In fact, if you look at the history of the Spanish flu, it's actually crazy how well this actually fits together over the course of a 10-year period that got people to adopt a system they would have never gone by. In that case, it was the progressive income tax with the IRS, with the exemptions that were made for foundations, which is where the rich people park their money, which is kind of how you see these NGOs in this World Economic Forum and the banks themselves in that scenario. That we're seeing something that could very easily replicate that, where you see America and Canada merge, where hey, we're going to have freedom, we're going to have a debt reset, we're going to have no currency, and the people came together to overthrow the evil government, and we have some populists come in there. And in that case, the populist was Woodrow Wilson. That the bankers, if you really want to know, Taft was standing against the creation of the bank. Roosevelt wanted support. They funded Teddy Roosevelt. Always comes back to the Roosevelt family to make sure Woodrow Wilson won. Woodrow Wilson was supposed to be the populist opposition. It was this miracle that he won. And what did he end up doing? He ended up giving us the Fed. He ended up giving us World War One. All of the problems that came. And on his deathbed, right before he went brain dead, he apologized for the fact he wrecked the nation. I mean, this is literally what happened. And in the same way, didn't we have a similar thing with Trump, the guy who couldn't win, who won, who came forward, or the movement that didn't have a chance? And you kind of wonder if we are being set up for a new future, and then what's that mean for the people who've been jabbed, who have not been jabbed? And you always have to remember, in the end, the elites want to be the good guys. And they know they're the bad guys right now. And shifting the narrative so that they don't have the insurrection get out of control is something that's out there. So you have to ask, are they setting up opposition to drain the chance to stand against this? In which case, then there might be a fight, there might be a terrorist attack, and then the totalitarian agenda goes forward. Or are they co-opting it? And of course, look, this is a dangerous conversation, right? Because the argument is, well, then everyone's a Fed, everything's a psyop, everything's a glowy, and it's not like that. It's more like this. It's that we are playing against people with a lot of resources who are very effective at turning things that are either organically set up or real impulses and utilizing them to their benefit. And that's why when we're fighting, we have to fight for decentralization. And when you talk about Bitcoin, it sounds good because you're decentralizing currency, but you're doing it at the price of giving up transparency. The same thing could be true of the internet, right? We thought when the internet came in the 90s that this was something that was going to allow people to connect around the world and speak and have real conversations with one another that were unregulated. And yet, what has it done? In functionality, it's made it where people don't connect in person, where economics are now separated from regions so people aren't connected, and that you have an intermediary in almost all of your conversations. Yes, there are those of us who are in places like Telegram, t.me/, Atlantic Homeland. And, we found alternate ways for funding. For instance, when PayPal shut me down, I moved over to Venmo, CVCPRV. But what you find is that you're always on the move and you're more and more marginalized because really, instead of technology enabling the person to speak, what it's doing is creating layers between people. So we don't have organic relationships. We don't have on the ground organization. And remember, with this trucker convoy, why did it succeed in the beginning, theoretically? Because they organized on CBs, on Citizens Band Radio. And actually, they are talking about, when I was watching, they were talking about kettling. Now, this is a word I didn't know before, but I knew the concept of it. And kettling was something that governments do when protests get too big. They'll shut down access to the internet in a given area, and they can do that through various means. They're allowed to do that, or, well, they have the capacity to do that. Whether they're allowed to do that, that's another question. So they shut it down, and they were saying the truckers there fear that that's going to happen. They fear a mass arrest, and whether or not they're just stoking the propaganda in another direction, where the anticipation now is increasingly towards a showdown, despite the fact that the truckers, to their credit or detriment, in reality, have requested an audience. And they had a nasty conversation in the House of Commons, the Chamber of Deputies, whatever they call it in Canada, up there. And I was watching some of these things. There was this woman who gets up there, her name is Rachel. I forget her last name. She was the MP for out near Winnipeg, somewhere in Manitoba, and she was just going. She's like, you talk about people suffering. What about the last 2 years? All the people who've been lonely and so depressed they died. The people who needed other medical coverage who didn't get it. Because we were stopping COVID. The suicides that have happened. The people whose businesses are wrecked beyond compare. And like those aren't even given validity in the Canadian press or most of the American press. They'll be like, no, they're evil, awful people. They need to rot. And at the meantime, who got the golden parachutes, right? It was the big banks. It was the people by BlackRock. And if you want to see who's funding some of these things, there's a group called Blackstone. I mean, Saturn needs to get his ass back out into outer space where he belongs. I'm sick of all the Saturnine crap. And if you don't know the history of Kronos, the God Eater, the occultism is absolutely crazy. I mean, what do you think they have that little black box in Mecca about? This is all connected. Leave that aside for a minute because we're not doing schizo stream right now. I'm going to try to stick to hard news instead of like deeper things. So the Canadians, the issue is coming to a head over there. That the policing is pushing in more. They're trying to stop fuel, and the truckers are beginning to understand. Like I shared the other day, there are two different types of protesters: celebratory and grim, and they're settling in for the grim protest. That they understand that this is a battle which can't be pushed aside, and we're starting to see it happen in America. I mean, it's a small start, but in Alaska,
starting to understand that the quest will claim their lives.
yeah, the quest will claim their lives. Absolutely. And, but maybe Gollum will grab the ring for us. Maybe he has good hair and he has Castro's genes. Who knows? Um, in Alaska, we've seen people starting to go to the border, and eventually America is going to get organized to some extent. Facebook has been working relentlessly to shut this down. By the way, Facebook's lost a quarter of its value. They're all in on this metaverse thing, which people think looks like a bad reboot of like the Wii upgrade from 2003. So it's definitely moving in a very quick direction. But what I wanted to say to you is one of the solutions they're going to present is they're going to say eventually when the goods shut down and you can't buy things and the hyperinflation happens, food going all over the place, big problem. Fertilizer prices have tripled in this last year. Ice Age farmers reported. Russia shut off its access to it. You see China being involved now in Argentina and Chile. Also heavy things. I mean, people don't know the biggest war in Latin America, one of the biggest wars in Americas altogether, the Western Hemisphere, was fought over bat guano between Chile, Peru, and Bolivia. And bat guano, in case you don't know, it has the explosive elements to make both important fertilizer and munitions. And I think it's interesting. Like I said, China literally affirmed Argentina's claim on the Falkland Islands. Just pieces, keep in the back of your mind as we talk about this. So what we're seeing is that we see the promise food is not going to be available. It's going to be expensive. It's going to be blamed on the truckers, and the currency reset is going to be presented as the solution. So, with that in mind, I want to read this story to you because I think it's connected. And I think it's no accident it came out today. This is going to be on MSN.com, and it came out. Market Watch by Chris Matthews. No, not that Chris Matthews. Welcome to Habbo. Not that guy, just another guy. But we'll put a link in here so you have it. So you're watching.
Give him a Bostonian accent.
You know how Chris Matthews sounds. Don't you think he sounds like that? You used to watch MSNBC back in that because you wanted to. You were being psychologically indoctrinated.
Enough. We're not going to talk about that.
Well, in any case, I'm just saying that's how he sounds. All right, so let me read this article. Let me switch it to so I can see what you guys are doing on camera while I do this because I got two different windows up. Give me 1 second, please. I don't want this to have a weird problem. So I can see you. You can see me. Good to see you, Corey. Glad you are here with us today. You can't see my screen, but I can see you. Okay, pull this a little wider because I'm old and blind. All right, and so this is from Market Watch, which it covers hard money news, right? Move toward digital dollar gains steam as the Boston Fed says its prototype can handle 1.7 million transactions per second. And this is from Chris Matthews, this is the name of the author. The creation of a government-backed cryptocurrency took a major step forward when Federal Reserve Bank of Boston released research in collaboration with the Massachusetts Institute of Technology on the technological viability of a Fed-backed digital dollar, also known as a central bank digital currency. And just so you know, the DoD puts a lot of money into MIT. They were essential, them and the CIA, in the creation of that institution as the thing it's known as today. That's where the scientists go who do the big money, that connecting door between the Pentagon and big finance. Princeton's another one, Berkeley, Stanford, the big ones. The results, and of course the Ivies, the results are promising for the viability of a digital dollar as the research produced two separate architectures for a potential US CBDC. central bank digital currency. That's your new digital dollar where they can trace and track everything. Why they're giving the IRS all this mandatory powers, and why Biden in his Build Back Better plan that they passed was putting in all these IRS agents. They're going to track and trace everything you do so that you don't have the option to exist outside of it. And they've built a better cryptocurrency, as they say. So they say one code base is capable of handling 1.7 million transactions per second, according to a white paper released on Thursday. That's more than 2.5 times the number of transactions Visa can handle on its network, according to statistics cited by Visa CFO Vasant Prabhu in a recent Barron's interview. Furthermore, the vast majority of these transactions were settled in less than 2 seconds, a tantalizing result for users of the U.S. banking system, which can force customers to wait days before fund transfers are settled. That performance is also far superior to popular cryptocurrencies, with the Bitcoin network capable of handling just 7 transactions per second and Ether just 25, according to research by Shihab Hazari, software developer and former researcher at Ontario Tech University. Though developers are working on methods to increase throughput on these blockchains, and they exist, by the way, there are crypto coins that do that. It's unlikely that decentralized networks like Bitcoin can compete on these metrics with a centralized network like the one proposed by the Boston Fed and MIT. So, crypto in this logic, I'm just stopping for a second, popularized an idea that freedom comes from money that's digital, and it made it was cool and it made it fun in a way that it would never have been. That there would be no defenders for it if we were just choosing cash against, if we were choosing paper cash against digital cash, we would choose paper cash because we have freedom. But because crypto exists to muddy the waters and made some people rich, even though how easy you're going to be able to access that electronically is a question. Now we're going to deal with that, and we're dealing with blockchains. And you have to understand the blockchain. Blockchain is all about chain of custody. What it basically says is that you can mark something, including what Rice University was researching, where they put graphene onto food. You can literally mark anything and trace it from start to finish. So, what is this about? It's about AI, it's about the system, the Internet of Bodies. It's the ability to trace and track everything so machine intelligence learning can see every transaction top to bottom. And why is this being pushed in the West? Well, in China, what happened was they had their cryptocurrency setups where, they were using all their payments to their phones. And so the AI there was getting more advanced and it was able to see much more in the economy, but we couldn't because we had a quote unquote obsolete system to feed data into the beast system. So since we want to get into the beast system full on in, what do we need? We need the ability to track every single transaction and every bit of detail of it. What do you need to do that? A central bank digital currency. And how do you need to do that? You need people to be so desperate that money becomes so worthless and the economy so wrecked that they will jump into this. And that's what we're going forward with in this situation. I mean, there's an actually crazy story I'm going to share with you. We're going to go down a little on a rabbit hole at the very end of this that I wanted to share with you that I think is kind of fun. In fact, let me see if I can find it real fast if I shared it on here because I'm not sure I did, but I did see something really fascinating that I wanted to share with you guys where literally there was a guy who used to work for one of the big banks who had been saying that in fact they had predicted in May of 2020 that this is exactly what would happen, and that in 2022, what would be the final outcome of this. I'll have to go find it. I might not be able to find it today. But what he said in the end situation was that they would have to go ahead and create this digital currency. They would push out the people who weren't on it, who did not choose to get the medical thing, and they would be on the fringes of society. And then they would just be able to control the people who had moved down the medical pathway because now they had certain dependencies. So they could issue this currency everywhere, and civilization would exist without it. And we would become a new Barbaroi, essentially, and that would be the fight of the future. And we see this happening in real time, that we are being exiled from our own societies, which is why the Canadians who are standing up here and why you have to care about this, whether or not the leadership is compromised, the reality is these are people saying that, look, you will not other us. That's the term they use. You will not deperson us. But that's what's happening, and cryptocurrency will make it 100 times worse because then people will be dependent on the government bribe. And the idea was that once everyone, it's like being on welfare. It's like Cloud Pivot. Once everyone's on welfare, no one will ever want to get off of it. And I'm not saying that welfare is a bad thing. That's not my goal is not to get into an argument about the need of taking care of people. I'm a Christian. Of course, I believe in taking care of the poor, but this is not a kind thing of people who care about the plight of the working man or the person who lives in poverty. The dripping contempt with which they viewed us within the United States, Canada, Australia, the UK, all these countries, Europe, is very, very clear. But what is also equally clear is that this is our last chance to take an off ramp. So we're all invested in this. We have to be. Absent, the Lord coming down with divine intervention, and maybe that's somewhere we have to get to. Maybe, I was thinking biblically what you would do in a situation like this. you would literally get your tribe together and walk off into the wilderness and say, God protect us, so you bring things down. I mean, and before it's all said and done, we might be doing that. We might be trying to pull in Elijah, and we're not as good a people as Elijah, so that's going to be a problem. But anyway, I go into this because I want you to understand what is being rolled out and how it's happening. So let's look at continuing on this article here from Market Watch through MSN. The successful rollout of a central bank digital currency will likely be resisted by Bitcoin purists who see Bitcoin as means to overthrow the power of central banks and governments over money. Other crypto enthusiasts who aren't wedded to the libertarian ideology that motivated the creation of Bitcoin are likely to welcome a digital dollar as evidence that the government are embracing their vision of a global economy greased primarily by cryptocurrency. Along with the research paper, the Boston Fed and MIT plan to upload the code that powers these experimental architectures to GitHub, a service that hosts open source code and enables developers around the world to give feedback and refine and improve the code. It's critical to understand how emerging technologies could support a CBDC and what challenges remain, Boston Fed Executive Vice President Jim Cunha said in a press release. This collaboration with MIT and our technologists has created a scalable CBDC research model that allows us to learn more about these technologies and the choices that should be considered when designing a CBDC. Americans are already using digital forms of money to execute most transactions. Cash use accounted for just 19% of all payments in 2020, according to the Fed Bank of San Francisco, while digital money, including credit cards, debit cards, and bank transfers, accounted for 67% of all transactions. A central bank digital currency could work much like the mostly bank issued digital money Americans use today, with some key differences. First, it would be backed by the full faith and credit of the US government and therefore risk free. Now, if you believe supporting this government is risk free, I got some I got some oceanfront property in Arizona to sell you, because this is making us be reinvested in this corrupt, wicked government, right? Second, transactions using a CBDC could be executed nearly instantaneously at little cost and with proper collaboration with foreign central banks, that's the Rothschild getting their cut, greatly reduce the cost and time it takes to execute cross border transactions. And this is why you see China and Russia building their alternate system. We're going to have competing systems, but the people in charge of it, still the same bankers. You see how it is? These are the new conflicts being set up there for the future, the new Cold War. And the question of how bad it gets is, how bad does it have to get for you to give up? They're not going to quit until you give in. You have to understand that about these people. They plan over generations, and we don't. We can't even plan to pay our bills next month, and now it's even harder, because what options do you have if you exist outside the system? But even in these countries where they're lifting restrictions, we're like, oh, we lifted them all, but not for the people who haven't taken the jab, because your jab doesn't work. If it worked, why would you be forcing us to take it? Because it's not about that. And whether you think there's something in it or not, ultimately the compliance that's being forced leads down a pathway where you will not have choices about your own human sovereignty in the future. But they don't care about that. They just want to get back to normal. That's what they want. They want to comply, and they're willing to do anything to you, and they don't care about the hypocrisy. You can even see this in how the Canada Convoys played out, where they'll be like, this is so terrible, we can't live our lives the way we want to. Oh, you think? 2 years. How many of us are living in destitution? I used to make a lot more money as an author back when we weren't living in this sort of structure. But you know what? The Lord's blessing upon each of you who was faithful and obedient and who stood against this. And you know what? I think there will be a millstone hung on the neck of every preacher who went out there and said, go take this. Because you know what? There's no biblical justification for that. Sorry, I have to say it's the absolute truth. And I'm not attacking the people who've taken it, by the way. I want to see them made whole. I want to see the banks be held liable. I want to see the health agencies like the CDC. That thing's like the Fed for medicine. That should be gone. What else do we want to? Definitely the big pharma, and to the doctors who look the other way, you know what? Now's the time for you to stand up. You know the people are getting sick. Why don't you tell your stories? Find a way. You don't like this platform? Go to Odyssey, go to Rumble, go to Brighteon, go to Gab, whatever you like. Go to Telegram. YouTube won't let you tell the truth. You know that. We're just here to wake people up. That's what we do. And I come here, and a lot of people come here, and we don't say the truth of things, not because we lie, but because we're not permitted to. We'll be shut down. Medical, it's a misinformation crusade. I mean, it's the truth, but it goes against the propaganda. And the problem is, we can still exist on the fringes of this, but CBDC, then they can trace every penny you're getting. You can't exist outside the system save through violence, and that's what they want, because they want to make the people who speak truth into their enemies, because they've been wanting a war against the people for a very long time. They want compliant sheep. That's what they want. We don't want you sheep because we like that word, but compliant. You know what I mean? All right, let's see where we are here. Advocates of CBDCs also believe a digital dollar could be used to foster greater financial inclusion, enabling Americans who are skeptical of banks to use a digital form of the Federal Reserve notes they carry in their pockets, enabling them to participate in the ever expanding online economy. Okay, so I know people who are skeptical of the system. They don't want this. Believe me, they're busy digging holes in their backyard, and if you grab the wrong one, you'll find a trap. Just believe me. This is just BS. And they'll say, "Oh, it's an equity issue. Minorities, they don't have access." No, this is bad for everyone. I mean, this means we'll all be on the plantation. That's all it means. Anyway, this research comes on the heels of a report issued by the Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve, which argued that if the central bank were to issue a digital dollar, it would be intermediated by the existing financial system, which would provide consumers with digital wallets or accounts for storing digital dollars. The report also stressed the need to safeguard Americans' privacy rights while balancing that goal with the transparency necessary to deter criminal activity. So let me ask you a question. Given what our governments are now defining as criminal activity, how comfortable do you feel with how they're going to regulate that in the future? Just think about it. What's that? Yeah, we don't like it. Murray's right. Researchers at MIT and the Boston Fed identified these competing priorities as an especially thorny problem as they continue to experiment with the technology. While it's possible to design a CBDC that would retain little data on transactions, such a design makes it more difficult to audit transactions for accuracy and to monitor for cyber intrusions, according to the white paper. There's your cyber polygon right there. They're gonna have every problem happen that the government suffers so much. Say like, look, we want to help you, we want to reset. It's terrible. We have this war. Evil Russians, terrible people, bad Christians, homophobes, and they're gonna say we have to have something so we can protect you, and they'll say, please protect us because that's what they're doing. Adult infantilism is what they've been teaching for years, and this is where they want people to go. They want people to be robots. That's why they invest so much in China because they act that way. And I feel bad for the Chinese people. They never had a chance. All right. So phase two of the project which is now underway, will include further research into these issues, as well as research into making digital dollars interoperable with other central bank digital currencies and potentially private currencies like Bitcoin and Ether. And so they're going to bribe the opposition, and that's what you do. You bring people in. The English crown did that thing. That's how they were able to survive for so long. That's how certain people got so much sway, actually. There are still many remaining challenges in determining whether or how to adopt the central bank payment system for the U.S., said Neha Narula, director of the Digital Currency Initiative at MIT, in a press release. Open source software provides an important way to collaborate, experiment, and implement. I tell you, are there any WASPs left? I mean, honest to God, it's like every one of these names. I mean, and I'm sure they're nice people. I'm not speaking bad of them, but it just goes to show you, you lose the culture. Everything is global. Everything's multicultural. We have no place where we can exist in exclusion, and that's what we need. I mean, if you really want to know how you got to beat this, you got to live in a society where money's not the priority. If money's the priority, they're always going to have that lever over you, and I know that's hard. We literally are probably going to have to reach the bottom to come back up. Just saying. And what that means. I think a lot of people understand that. And that's why probably a civil war, violence, all that's more likely because they're not giving in. I mean, the Canadians are being as nice and polite as you can be, just saying, "Let us live how we want to live." And
Not
if
getting it
ultimately they
done.
say no, it's not getting it done.
Not
It's
getting
not.
it done.
It's not getting it done. It's not going to get it done. And I think that all this is just propaganda pretense. I mean, it's Lexington and Concord all over again. Let's be honest. We're just waiting for the redcoats. This time they're the RCMP. Actually, they're redcoats again. They actually follow that tradition, and they're going to go try to take away from the people. They went and raided their supply thing, in Lexington and Concord in the American Revolution. The people stood up and said, "No, you're not going to do it." Now the Canadians are being nicer because, after all, let's remember they're the loyalists in the end. But at some point, say they tried to do that in Alberta, I don't think those boys would accept that. And if the Canadian government over there it decides that they want to have a battle, maybe this is a global decision, I guess. If they decided in Canada, just imagine for a second that the boys, the RCMP, that are trapped between the convoy, supporting the convoy at Milk River and the other one at Coots, it ain't gonna be long before Montanans overrun that border and they're going to be helping the Free Republic of Alberta against, and then it's everyone against everyone, and maybe that's where this goes. I don't see how we avoid that at this point. I mean, unless governments give way and say we're not going to do these mandates anymore. And even if they did, let's say they gave way, what's to say that they won't say, "Oh, new strain, shutting it back down again"? Because that's the smart move for them. It's evil, but hey, we're dealing with evil people, so let's be honest about it. I mean, let's actually analyze this as the war it is, the war of the elites against the people having the ability to have enough wealth to compete against them. That's what cryptocurrency is ultimately about on some levels. Yeah, some people got rich by being early adopters to make it popular, just like some people had websites that were really popular. But at the end of the day, how many, when you look at the internet, we used to have a whole bunch of different websites people went to. Now it's all just quick vignettes on social media of pre-programmed influencers and an algorithm where you watch things. And yeah, there are alternatives. You can go find them, but they're going to go after those. Those are shut down. They're subverted. That's, we're stuck in these shadowy realms. We are being pushed ever more and more into black markets. And the black market, what that's going to look like in a post-currency world, because some people, they're going to be fully on board with the system. They're going to be fully taken care of. What are we going to be doing? So let's continue what says, because this is why we talk about currency out here. It's not because I really like to talk about markets. No one likes to hear about it. But you need to talk about this is the way we interact with people. If you don't want me to talk about central bank digital currencies, if you don't want me to talk about crypto, let's talk about ways we can connect to one another. Like I said in that article I read on Sunday for Sons of Dust, where the work was you bring the community together first. That's what we need to be doing. We need to be having conversations with that and people. We need to be working in our areas to build resilient structures. And that's what the truckers did in one community, but it needs to be in geographic spaces as well. And we can't do it because ideology divides us. We have no common culture, and they did that on purpose. We have no shared beliefs. They broke the religions, and they had their schools and the propaganda. You understand? Anyway, one benefit of a central bank digital currency in the eyes of financial regulators is their potential to supersede popular stable coins like DAI, Tether, and USD coin, digital assets that peg their value to the USD. These instruments are used by cryptocurrency investors to park unused funds and protect them from the extreme volatility of the crypto markets. The Biden administration released a report on stablecoins in November that outlined a variety of risks stablecoins pose to investors and the economy more broadly, including risks related to a so called run on stablecoin because of doubts about the backing assets. Many popular stablecoins, and we've talked about that here. Mike Adams did a lot of that too, if you're curious on this issue. Many popular stablecoins are backed by real assets and maintain their value by promising to always exchange one token for one USD. If investors lose confidence in the amount or quality of assets backing a stablecoin, it could trigger a self reinforcing cycle of redemptions and fire sales of reserve assets. And by the way, we've seen that in how the whales have wrecked the crypto market so they can get in cheap, so they can get control of the market using their fiat before they put the new thing in, so they'll control that as well. It will be another form of controlled opposition. Yeah, some people have held out, but remember, when you're trying to find what's his name, Satoshi, who he is, a lot of people think it's the NSA based on the crypto, the 256 hash of it. People who've studied this, who know far better than I do. These are people who spend their life, looking at what the programming is of this. So when you see the handwriting on the wall, you have to talk about that. The Biden administration recommended that Congress pass legislation requiring stablecoins be issued by a bank insured by the FDIC. So they're saying that they're going to take control of the heart of the market there, and that way you can put unlimited fiat into control over the cryptocurrency. It will be overseen by federal banking regulators in order to mitigate these risks. An effective and popular digital dollar, however, could potentially reduce the need for stablecoins by giving the crypto economy a means to seamlessly transform their tokens into central bank money. So you can see what the scam they could do here. They could crash the crypto market by taking down Tether or taking down USD coin and then say, okay, we'll give you your new stable coin. Hey, it's your CBDC. And then the money will float into there and say, oh, we can use this in the market. And then, Bitcoin and all that will be speculative assets. They'll be allowed to float for certain countries and that'll be fine. But ultimately, because it's being pegged once again to the USD stablecoin as the main developer of it, the US dollar continues its hegemony into the new world order. And you will see the Russians and Chinese will try to oppose that, by the way. This is yet another means to try to keep the US dollar. They're trying to make it in the old days, you would have the US dollar have currency because of the petrodollar, because it was something that had value that was really being sold. In the age of social media, utility becomes a means unto itself where you have the first adopter advantage, where everyone uses something because it's good enough and they don't care enough to switch to something new. The USD central bank digital currency is trying to arrange that by manipulating the crypto market while simultaneously setting up the ability to have a surveillance state of blockchain where they can watch everything for both auditing and surveillance purposes. This is the real world you live in. And while you do that, they're going to rely on advanced AI that's going to use quantum computing computing to track every single thing that you are doing, and that you will not be able to exist outside of a certain social credit score that will be watched in this. This is the real world you're living in that's being constructed, and you don't have a lot of options to exist outside of it, save that if you're willing to live at the edge of poverty and whatever collective force people are willing to put together. And that's why the actions that are happening now are so important, and why we need to support what's happening with the Canadians seeking their freedom at all costs. Because if that gets shut down there, it will be used as justification to shut down anything here. And we've shown that America can't figure a way to go through this on our own because we're too violent and we hate each other too much. It's just the reality of the different groups. It's what happens when a country loses God, that discord rules the land, and that we have no love for one another in our hearts. And it's hard. I'll admit to it. I'll confess to it. There are people who politically and who medically have views that I find abhorrent. Their actions are terrible, and yet I have to remember the Lord created them for another purpose. And so I give credit to the Canadians who are speaking that way, and it's an admonition to us as Christians to remember we have to connect to one another. Now, whether we do that and all walk away, which is what the Pinelander program is ultimately all about, and what I have to kind of try to work with you guys and try to figure out more meaningfully how to accomplish. What we do see is the quick movement that was promised in documents going all the way back to different institutions, Event 201, the Cyber Polygon, Global Supply Chain, the one Podesta was involved with, all these think tank exercises where they had said they were going to connect all of these pieces to have complete control over the system. And that we are seeing that. And if America can't fit into that system, then we'll be self destructed and rebuilt in the image of however that needs to happen. And I think that they understand America's not going to go for that. I think they understand other countries aren't going to go for that, and that we will see war result very quickly. Now, when the time we're talking about all this, let's not forget we're still not far from the possibility of Russia and the Ukraine getting into a war. We did see President Macron go over there. He's facing a rather difficult election coming up, where nobody likes him. But the problem is in France, the people who actually want to do things don't really have the ability to put things together. And I think there's like 14 parties over there. So it's kind of a mess, whether you like Zemmour, who's going out there basically putting a hardcore left sort of nationalist message. Le Pen is still out there. But the problem is people will say, well, that's too radical. But we're getting to the point where the French are maybe saying, hey, you know what? Maybe we need to try something radical. And that this is one of the propaganda things I saw in the CBC broadcasting, that these radical extreme parties exist outside of the democratic consensus where everyone has value. I mean, they understand it's an attack. We're now fighting cultural warfare. I mean, and it's cultural warfare because you see the cities targeting the countryside. You see the Bolsheviks targeting the kulaks. And it's no accident that we're the ones being labeled with yellow stars these days, because we are the ones who are medically, inappropriate, because we're our blood is not. I mean, honestly, because our blood is undirty. If you really want to get into it, I mean, I'm sure it's dirtied by other things. We were watching. Dana will attest to this. We were watching a video, and it was about water and how water responds. They had water that was exposed to different frequencies and different words and different concepts, and they froze the water. And what you saw is that when they were beautiful concepts like love or divinity, and they were set up in the water, would form into these beautiful things. And yet when they were exposed to ugliness, it was misshapen, it was hideous. And you start to realize, like, the way, how should I put it, matter reshapes itself in response to the frequencies that we put out through our words. It's why word is so powerful. It's why the Lord says, when we talked about the book of James, when you put the word out there, you're saying things in a way that really can shape the way the future goes. And we have to figure out a way to build something strong and durable against this ugliness that's being pushed on us, because we're just going deeper and deeper into the pits. Like, say you like metal music. The reason you like metal music probably is because it resonates with a world that's so broken. You feel like, oh God, this is at least relief, and it understands what I'm dealing with. And we can't even understand what's good and what's beautiful anymore. This is a civilizational crisis, because we've been led so far astray into our own degradation that all we can think is, God, let's fight. And then what are we fighting for? We don't know, but we're fighting because we've had everything that's good stolen from us. We are at the bottom of a pit, looking up in darkness, knowing there's light there, seeing the light that we can always see. The one light you can always see, no matter how big, small the pit is, the light of Christ is above us. But we see the light of the other good things that He intended for us that's hidden from us by these evil people. And they give us different solutions. Say, oh, here's a ladder, like Charlie Brown kicking the football. And that is what we are dealing with over and over again, because we know that we have liars. We know that each party lies. We know that every government lies. And like Living Soul says, by the way, perfect thing. The magic formula the globalists rely on is a slow drip takeover. If they run the marathon and resist sprinting to the finish line, they have a much better chance. They know how to play this game because they have resources. They have resilience and they can stand outside it. Whereas the rest of us, we're stuck under laws that are against us, that do not serve our interest. And so we, at some point, have to organize a breakout. And you know what? They said the dark winter is here. They are going to use this to hurt us. The only question is how well we can organize and stand against it. And I just pray that with the Canadians who are up there, that their leadership is sincere and legitimate, or that they be moved to it, that the Lord do a work where they are brought out of that, where they can lead people to something where something good can result. But whether they do or don't, remember, this world goes into tribulation. It's a reminder that there's a lot more out there than this world. And I just want to say, put your faith in the Lord Jesus Christ, because this world is going to spin itself out of control. And if we can't believe in God, we probably can't believe in each other. And if we can't believe in each other, we can't do anything good for one another. And that's the reality, because even if you try to help someone, they'll just end up hating you for it. It's a sad truth that we live within. But that's what's out there today. Like I said, Macron was meeting with Putin. No real big resolutions on the Ukraine thing, other than the fact that Russia is using that as a wedge to break apart NATO, separating the Western core from the Eastern countries. It's proving very effective in a lot of ways. It will further weaken the United States, and whether or not they decide to go into war or not, America wants the war to keep Europe on its side. Whether they can manage it or not depends how evil they're willing to be in Ukraine. If there's a false flag attack, I'm not saying the Russians aren't above one, but I honestly believe it'd be our side doing it. Especially considering that I was watching a video on Vice of all places, and it was talking about these Ukrainian militants, and they come from Western Ukraine, and you can even see this. There was a story today that the American embassy is considering moving from um, Kiev to Lviv, which is basically, it used to be part of Poland. It's in the far west of the country. And it makes me wonder if a tacit agreement for a partition is already understood and that the East Bank has already been ceded. If they're moving that far west, what that says to me is Kiev will either be taken or demilitarized. The center of gravity will move to the west, and that Russia, whatever plan's given, probably will give them all the way from Odessa, what they call Novorossiya, over to the eastern borders to Kharkiv, Poltava, and of course all the way past Mariupol, and the Crimean connection to where Donetsk and Luhansk is. And maybe that's the end game of it, whether that be a separate Eastern Ukraine Russian state, or Russian states. Maybe you make two of them, Odessa be separate, or you directly annex them. I don't know. But it seems like the understanding is that the spheres of influence are back, and that America's ability to offer opposition to them is minimal. That realistically we are broken, and everyone's waiting to see what the next thing to fall is going to be. And I think the inflation and food shortages are going to make a big run. Farmers are signaling very heavily they can't get the fertilizer they need. Take it from someone who spends a lot of time with crap all over him. You don't have good fertilizer, you don't have good food. You don't have good food, you got angry people. And we have run out our supplies through COVID, through the shutdowns, government confiscation probably took a lot of those supplies. Migration between borders doesn't happen the way it used to. So the ability to put that forward, you would expect a lot of people are going to be put into desperation, and if it gets bad enough, a lot of people will die. This is 2022. Sorry for the bad news. And I'm not even talking about things. I had a friend talking to me about, this is all a distraction, like that Netflix movie, Don't Look Up. That we're going to be dealing with intervention from outside. And hey, maybe it's possible. People say aliens, coming down. I don't believe that personally. I think it's demons. I think that, this is maybe the return of the Nephilim in a blue beam type project that's designed to put, hey, these are the heroes, like Arthur C. Clarke's Childhood End. But whatever you think that is, they're going to offer pre-made solutions that most people are going to take. And so if you are a quote unquote sovereign citizen and you don't want to go on board with this, hard days are ahead. So you better be making friends, gather what resources you can, be ready for a difficult road down the line. And, I saw someone say that, how can you prepare in a world like this? And they had good advice. I forget the name of the person, but he said, live below your means. And I think that's absolutely true. Save and accumulate resources, learn to live close to the land, learn how to take care of your basic needs. I've emphasized so many times in this program, water and sanitation should be foremost amongst them. The day when the electrical grid doesn't work is not so far away, potentially. You need to be ready for that. And you need to have an understanding of your human geography. Know who's around you, who you can work with, who you can talk to, and try to start spreading some news. I mean, people will listen. Find a way. Don't make it partisan. Don't offer solutions. to explain problems and ask people what you think their solutions would be. The number one thing they teach you, they have these ridiculous things back in the day called candidate school. I never went to one, but I knew a guy who operated one. He's kind of a douchebag, actually, but which of course you'd kind of expect. But the thing about it was that this is, neurolinguistic programming. You can see how certain ideas are planted, and if we talk about it, it negates the ability of consciousness to get fooled by that. But what you do if you want to have someone agree with you, you play on their emotions, right? And you let them speak about what they want. Say, oh, I want that too. I want that too. The best politicians always ask a bunch of questions, and they never have to offer answers. There's a plus to it on both sides, right? So what do we do going forward? All we can do is watch this. We'll keep an eye on it. Dana and I will definitely keep an eye on Ottawa going forward. And that's honestly, you'll laugh, but one of the reasons I'm working on my ham radio license, I'm thinking of what I want to do for the future because I know I want to write a book for you guys. I'm going to try to do that here at the end of the month, give you some ideas about what we need to do in a bigger sense. But why I'm working to get that is so that we can still program when they shut us down. We find other ways. We have to be willing to use technology to disrupt the system enough without giving ourselves slavishly in submission to it. I think that's a really big point at this point that we have to figure out how to do that. And if we don't, we're going to be in big trouble. I mean, we're in trouble. We're in trouble. And we're fighting a rearguard battle. But the system they require has a lot of vulnerabilities and it's not impossible to be beaten. And at the end of it, it's a leap of faith. We're trying to live closer, at least, to what God would want. And I think if we ask God to help us, in the end, that's the best power we have. And I think I'll close with that. I think that's a good place to go. Heavenly Father, I just want to say, lead us toward a life that's pleasing to you. Teach us how to walk away from those things that are deadly to us. And we ask, Father, you instruct us. The book of James, it says, wisdom will be offered to all who ask. And we ask, Father, especially on this channel, that we put out a message that's pleasing to you and that you help us overcome the many sins and the despair and the suffering and the division that plagues this land. We know you'll look out for your people. You say that, and we ask for you to, Father, we actually want to ask, we thank you, Father, because we know your word's true for fulfilling that promise. So in Jesus' mighty name, I just pray that for everyone who's here in this audience and listening today, that we have the opportunity to do that. So, um, that's where we're at in the story, and we'll see where we are as the week goes by. A lot of people think that something in the next 2 weeks is going to happen with Russia. They're scheduled to leave their exercise in Belarus on the 20th. So if something is apt to happen in this cycle, which if it doesn't happen soon, you'd think for logistic reasons because of the mud, it wouldn't happen. Um, Next couple weeks. So just keep your head on a swivel, and I'll be here covering that. So for Dana, for myself, for the chicken who's actually being mercifully quiet for once, although the turtles are not, and for Murray who's around here somewhere, which I don't know where. God bless each and every one of you. Thank you for supporting this program. If you like the program, you want more content, hey, you want to help out, the Venmo CVCPRV, PO Box 35, Greenville Junction, Maine 04442. The Telegram groups t.me/Atlantic Homeland. I want to thank you for supporting us there. So you guys have a good rest of your day. God bless each and every one of you. And Pinelander out. See you guys.